All right. Grace, forgiveness, and love as leadership tenets. So I had several things happen this weekend. I have a dear friend of mine who is going through something pretty traumatic, and so that just kind of took the wind out of my sails. But then I also had a chance to meet with a friend of mine that I've known forever, and she was in town for a wedding, and we got a chance to meet for coffee, which was just lovely, and spend some time together. And we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things she asked me, she said, I said, it's about giving yourself grace. And she said, but what does grace look like? And I started talking about what grace wasn't, right? Grace isn't blaming yourself. Grace isn't giving yourself a break. Grace isn't saying, why didn't you? You should have. That's not grace. And she looked at me and she said, okay, well, we know what grace is not, but what is grace? How do you define grace? And I had to sit with that a minute because I thought, I tell people and tell my clients all the time, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Give yourself, that doesn't mean give yourself a pass, but give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself, right? Be patient with yourself. What you know is in there somewhere, right? Our brains are so powerful. Our memories are so powerful. And we don't know. My therapist was telling me yesterday, we don't know a whole lot about memory and how the memory works. We know some, but we don't know a whole lot. But we also know that there are things that we recall and things that happened to us when we were very, very young. That's why there's so much work around childhood trauma, that we are very, very young, that we don't forget, that our cells remember, right? Our bodies remember the experiences, even though our minds may not be able to recall them. So we started talking about this whole idea of grace. And then this morning, as I was getting ready for the show and prepping and deciding about the podcast, I was listening to Joyce Meyer, and she was talking about forgiveness and how, the big piece about forgiveness is letting things go, really, really letting things go, like being done with whatever it is, right? Being done. And how when we keep harboring it, that stuff festers. And how, really, if you ever listen to Michael Curry, who is the bishop for the Episcopal Church in the United States, and he talks a lot about love. He's the one who did the sermon at Meghan and Harry's wedding. See, like I know them, Meghan and Harry, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex at their wedding. He's the one that did the sermon that talked about love. And he says, you're supposed to love your neighbor, but while you're at it, love yourself. And so I got to thinking this morning about how, as individuals, those ideas of grace and forgiveness and love are so difficult. And Jerry and I were talking this morning about how, that some of that stuff is hard. Because if you're a go-getter, if you're trying to make things happen, or if you've even been trained and taught, you got to move. We've had that conversation before, especially people of color, and especially Black women now, that be better, move faster, do more, work harder. When it gets kind of crazy, you just dig deeper, because the first place you look is, well, I must not have hustled hard enough. I must not be working hard enough. It must be me. Something must be wrong because it's not happening the way I want it to happen. And so we get all this pressure, and we have a really hard time letting stuff go. We have a hard time letting go of control. And that's what that's about, right? It's wanting to know the outcome, wanting to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, why it's going to happen, how we're going to come out the other side. But as my therapist always says, the only way for you to get over something is to go through it. I think Robert Frost said that first. The only way to get over something is to go through it. The only way to experience something is to experience it. And not everything we experience is pleasant. Not everything we experience is good. Not everything we experience is happy, right? Some things we experience are very, very hard, very, very difficult. And if you are, an introvert and an empath like me, where you absorb a lot of energy, that can be very difficult, especially when you're making sure you're pouring into everyone else intentionally, because that's what you want to do. And especially those really close to you, you want to make sure you are doing everything to show up for them. You forget sometimes to show up for yourself, and you can do both, but you have to put your mask on first sometimes. And so it led me to this whole idea of, but what about those things in leadership? Whether you are an individual, because remember, leadership is about behavior, not about position. When you are in leadership, what does it look like to give someone grace? What does it look like to be forgiving? What does it look like to love? I think there's somebody I follow on Instagram, and if he's listening, you have to forgive me. He always talks about love. Love is, I think, business is love, or love is business, or some love is key to business, something like that. He's an author. Forgive me for just butchering that, but and I started thinking about these three words because that's how it comes to me usually. These three words, and I thought, if you look back on your career, any of us, if you look back on your career, whether that was building your business or building a career, where you were working in an organization, working for somewhere else, sometimes you just harbor things, right? That's what Joyce Meyer was talking about. You got to let it go. And there are things that I think about to this day that happened to me in my first job, that I'm like, man, I should have said, if I'd have just thought, right? I can't believe they did that to me. I mean, and I will literally have an emotional response to the memory. I'll still feel the pain. I'll still feel the shame. I'll still feel the anger. I still feel the shoulda, right? Should have said. I mean, it's like, I will not let that bone go. Now, that's not to say that you forget everything that ever happened to you. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, right? Because those things also begin to build our experiences. They begin to build that scar tissue. They begin to build that toolbox that enables us to move forward in a different way. But when you are in leadership, when you're leading others, or when people are following you either directly or indirectly, formally or informally, that idea of forgiving people and loving people and giving grace is so important. And sidebar, if you have not picked it up, please pick up Alexis Thompson's book, The Power of a Graceful Leader. It's fantastic. You can get it on Amazon. That whole idea of grace. And Kendall's leadership book too. Kendall Wright's leadership book, Leadership Soul. It's phenomenal too, and it's cool because it's tied to some Motown music. So make sure you pick those two things up. My two tidbits for you today. But we have a hard time thinking about grace and forgiveness and love in the context of business, in the context of anything that's professional. One, because we've gotten to be so litigious. So heaven forbid you say the word love, or you talk about forgiveness, right, or grace. We've got to be so litigious that we have a hard time saying words like that. But more importantly, how do we manifest those things in a way that are authentic and that lead to outcomes that we're actually looking for? So I'll take the example of forgiveness first. You have a big project that's going on. You have a team that is moving towards something that's really important for you. And something happens. And the outcome isn't what you wanted. Somebody gets sick. Somebody pulls out of the project. Somebody doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. Somebody doesn't perform the way you needed to. Expectations were, whatever. Something happens. And you don't get the outcome that you wanted. Typically, what happens is that becomes a part of a performance review. That may become a part of conversations for the next millennia. That begins to impact the person's ability to be put on the next project or to be considered high potential, whatever that means, because that changes daily too. We harbor our experience with the person and begin to turn that into, instead of just one data point, we turn it into the entire story. And in that context, forgiveness looks like saying, you know what? Let me examine actually what truly happened in this situation, including potentially my part in that situation. What occurred? What didn't occur? What were the outcomes? What was the behavior? Let me not pass judgment on the character of this person. Let me go look at the behaviors and the outcomes and the impacts and determine what the root causes of that was, what the root causes were of that. And then let me issue and give forgiveness to that person for their potential missteps or failures, for lack of a better word, and see how we can continue to work and move and grow together. That's what forgiveness looks like in business. Forgiveness looks like that performance review not becoming the thing that pops up for the next 10 years of someone's career. It looks like someone having a bad day not becoming, oh, well, you can't ever talk to that person. It looks like giving people the opportunity to learn and grow and change. Now, while our fundamental character doesn't change, right? Fundamentally, we are who we are. We can modify behaviors when we choose to, when we understand that the behaviors are a problem. We can and have the ability to modify behavior. So, how about taking forgiveness as a way in which we take that engagement with someone, our experience with someone, and use it as simply a data point? Now, if we keep seeing the behavior, right, and the data points tend to connect, and we're like, yep, this is just the way this person behaves under these circumstances, okay, that's fine. But forgiveness looks like taking, at least when you have the first experience with someone, or where there was a really tough situation and someone maybe acted out of line or out of their normal behavior, that we don't use that as a way to pass judgment on how they're always going to be for the foreseeable future. Not only is that not fair, it is probably not accurate. And so forgiveness in that sense is giving someone the opportunity to do something different, giving someone the opportunity to show up differently, giving someone the opportunity to do better and be better the next time. That's what forgiveness looks like in that context. It's also important that we think about forgiveness for ourselves when we've had that failure. And I've been there. I've had some humongous failures in corporate America. I mean, like public failures. And I didn't die. I was embarrassed, right? And I'm one of those, when you mess up, you own it, you apologize, and you make it right. That's why I have such a hard time with some people who just cannot own their own stuff. You got to own your own stuff, y'all. You got to know you. But they didn't kill me, right? I didn't just fall over. They didn't end my career. In fact, they were the stones upon which I built my success. Those stones that were cast at me became the bricks of the success that I built. But I had to be willing to forgive myself too, because I could wallow in that stuff. And for those of us who are, good morning, Sarah. For those of us who are trained, I won't say wired. I mean, there are some things about our wiring, but those of us who are trained to focus on achievement and success and how you're showing up and where you're showing up and if you're showing up and all that kind of stuff. For those of us who are trained to be really focused on that kind of up or out mentality, that idea of forgiving ourselves can also be really hard. It is not one of my superpowers. I'll just admit that. It is not one of my superpowers, especially those of us who have heightened senses of personal responsibility and accountability. And yet forgiving ourselves is also an important piece in this professional landscape in order for us to take the situation and learn from it, to be able to move forward with it, around it, through it, to use it as a tool instead of a weapon, to use it as that foundational stone, to be able to do something better next time, to be able to show up differently, to be able to help others not experience the same thing that we experienced, right? To train and teach and support other people who are trying to get where we are. So forgiveness doesn't look like this namby-pamby or this holier than thou, just walking around, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. It looks like kindness. It looks like reasonableness. It looks like taking a pause to understand that none of us is perfect. And each of us has a bad day at some point. Each of us goes through a really, really tough, traumatic time. Each of us makes a mistake and can sometimes be more focused on eliminating our own pain or keeping ourselves safe, so much so that we don't recognize the pain that we're causing someone else or the discomfort that we're causing someone else, especially when we are doing so out of pure service, or so we think, right? It's when It's when we are listening, when we're not listening, right? Because active listening is listening not just with your eyes, but it's listening with your, not just with your ears, it's listening with your eyes as well. It's listening with your heart, right? That's what active listening is. It's listening to what people say and what they don't say, how they respond physically as well to what the engagement is. And so that forgiveness, right? That kindness, that active listening, sometimes we mess up because we aren't really paying attention. We are so focused on what we're trying to deliver to the person, most of the time out of the goodness of our heart, that we stop listening and we stop being able to modify or morph or change depending on what they need in that moment. Because service is not about us. Service is not about us. Loving someone is not about us, right? It's about the other person. Being connected to someone is not about us. It's about the other person. And hopefully when we are connected, when we are truly connected and connected with our spirits and our souls, that we also get that same love and kindness and forgiveness back. That's what it means. It's an action. Love is an action. Yes, it is a feeling. It's absolutely a feeling, but it's also an action. And so once we have figured out a way to forgive ourselves, right, through kindness, then we have to think about that part of grace, giving grace. And the way I think about grace and being a graceful leader, you know, that whole idea of grace and gracefulness is often attached to beauty, right? Something that's smooth, effortless, gorgeous, right? Easy, soft. That's grace, right? Especially effortless, right? That's the word that comes to mind when I think about grace, effortless. You think about dancers, right? They're so graceful. You think about amazing speakers who gracefully navigate, the best leaders we know, gracefully navigate tough situations. They know how to be authentic and real. They know how to address tough subjects head on with authenticity, even though we overuse that word, and honesty, right? And a level of vulnerability that does not undermine their strength or people's trust in them, but demonstrates their humanity. So part of forgiveness is giving ourselves some grace, but also giving grace to others. That's what that means. Effortlessly allowing others to just be human, to be vulnerable, to be willing and ready to show up however they can show up, because we don't know what race someone else has run when they get to the front door that day. We don't know how difficult it may have been just to get out of bed that morning, right? We've talked about that polyvagal theory, whether you're when you're in dorsal or sympathetic or you're in ventral. Ventral is pure joy, right? That's zone of genius. You're in the zone. Sympathetic is your fight or flight, right? You may be feeling like you're in the zone, but you can tell because your energy is revved up, right? Got to get it done, got to make it happen, hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. That's sympathetic. Nervous system response. But dorsal, that's that I can't take anymore. I just want to go to bed. I don't know how to show up. I don't want to show up. I don't know even what I need. I'm really sad. I'm really hurt. I'm really disengaged. I'm disconnected. I don't understand why. I need to know why. I need to know the answers. I need to know the outcome. All of that stuff that we need to know that just doesn't happen. We can't know ultimately what's going to happen. We can't. We can't predict the future, right? But grace says, I see all of that. I see all of that. I feel all of that. I understand all of that. And you know what? We're still going to be together and make this happen. We're going to connect. We're going to be the best we can. And we're going to show up and we are going to show out because we've got stuff to do. And we're going to fall, but we're going to get back up. And if you have trouble getting back up, I'm going to help you up. And you do the same for me when you have the opportunity. That's what grace looks like. Grace looks like no judgment. Grace looks like understanding that everybody's journey is different. Grace looks like saying we are clear on where we're going. We are clear on why we're going. We are clear on the fact that we all want to get there and we all have a part to play and that we're all going to do the best we can. And that sometimes we're going to fail. And when we do, we will apologize and we'll make it right and we'll do better next time. That's grace. That's grace. And so if you've been able to forgive yourself and others, and then been able to think about being graceful with others and giving yourself grace, giving yourself a pause, managing expectations of yourself, not expecting yourself to be perfect all the time, not expecting yourself to be happy all the time, being kind and gentle, because things happen and we go through some really, really tough, difficult, heart-wrenching times. And hopefully when we do, there are people around us who love us and care for us, who can uplift us and support us when we need that. That's also grace. And we can absolutely give people grace in business. In fact, we need to be willing to give people grace in business, because that's why you have so many people leaving. Think about what's going on right now, right? Now, as the world is opening back up and people are going back to work, but some people can't or won't, people are looking for something else that matters, because if nothing else, one of the things we found out during this time is what really matters: the relationships that we have, the lives that we have, not just the things that are around us. And so giving people grace to navigate, because this is a new world for everybody, not just a few. It's a new world for everybody. It's a new world for leaders. It's a new world for employees. It's a new world for entrepreneurs. It's a new world for every individual that's just trying to make it that day. It's a new world. And so by giving ourselves grace, we have the opportunity to just take a pause and to not expect perfection. And there's a difference in expecting excellence and expecting perfection. Expecting people to show up the best way they can and giving them space to be honest about when they need a minute, right? When they need a mental health day. I had a friend of mine and I who is also going through some things. Got a lot of friends going through stuff lately. It's one of those seasons, it appears to be. And I told this friend of mine, I said, you know what? Maybe you just need to call in and take a mental health day. You just need to take a mental health day. And they called me back later and said, thank you so much for telling me to do that, because I really needed that minute. I needed that space. I needed that opportunity to give myself some downtime and to take care of some things that I could get them off my list that were weighing on me, and to just be for a minute. And here's the thing. Take the mental health day. Take the mental health day. There is no other time in my life that I think there's been a level of acknowledgement that we have now that mental health matters, that stress is a killer, that burnout is real. If you need the mental health day, take the mental health day. If you can prepare for it, great. But have that care and love for yourself that you are willing to say, you know what, today, I don't have it today. I don't have it today, and I just need a minute. Whether that's even running your own business, because you need to be able to do that yourself too. And just take a minute and not beat yourself up about it. That's the key piece. That's the hard piece for us type A's, right? Don't beat yourself up about needing a day. So once we've forgiven people, we've got to give people some grace. And then we got to show some love. We got to show some love to people. And what does love look like professionally? Love does not look like, touching people and all that kind of stuff. I love you. I love you. That's not what that looks like in a professional setting. But what it does look like in a professional setting is compassion. That's how love shows up in a professional setting. It's compassion. It's understanding that everybody's human. It is recognizing that sometimes you just need to reach out to somebody and say, hey, are you all right? I notice you're more quiet than you were. It's about curiosity and concern and compassion. You're not, normally by now you're like on your third cup of coffee and you haven't even had one today. What's up? Is there something I need to know? And then being willing to be quiet and listen, right? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's a reason. We should listen more than we speak. And when we're confused, and sometimes when we're in a leadership position, we're listening to respond, not listening to understand. And if you're loving people, if you're showing compassion, you want to understand so that your response to them is what they need. Your response to them is being in true service. That's what compassion and love look like in a professional setting. Now, the challenge for us is being able to be compassionate and forgiving and loving to ourselves. That just takes some effort. And I'm not talking about arrogance, y'all. I'm not talking about, those who walk around and say, I just love me. And there are some people who truly, truly feel that way. And so I'm not passing dispersions on those who have gotten there already. Most people are still on the journey, including me, because I have my days where I'm like, really, really, Laurel, are you kidding me? But these things for us are about making sure that we understand how we're showing up and what we need. Because if we can't even tune into what we need, how are we going to tune into other people's stuff? Although often it's easier to help others than it is to recognize our own drama. Because when you start forgiving yourself and giving yourself grace and loving yourself, you also have to be willing to be open to those things that you probably don't want to face, you don't want to address. Like, okay, my team didn't do as well as I wanted it to do. Did I give them what they needed? Was I clear in my expectations and my guidance? Was I available to them when they needed me for support? All of those things, right? We have to be willing to be transparent with ourselves and honest with ourselves if we're going to do that same thing for others. Because people believe what you do. They hear what you say, but they believe what you do. And if you even give an inkling that you're just checking the box, oh, I need to go out and ask everybody how they're doing today. I need to pick up the phone and call everybody. But when you call, you're like, yeah. Okay, I'm so glad. Glad you picked up the phone. Okay, let me know if you need anything. Click. Have you really listened? Have you demonstrated that you really are concerned about the other person? And again, from a business perspective, you don't have to ask people all their business, and you shouldn't. Right? You don't have to ask the nitty-gritty details and all that kind of stuff. You're not trying to have people open the kimono so they know everything about what's going on. That's not what you're asking. Because you're still wanting to know in the context of what needs to happen in that particular relationship, in that particular situation, right? In that particular organization. That's what you're trying to get at. What are the barriers that may be in place at the moment that are preventing movement forward or success or even just status quo? That's what you're trying to get at. And so by showing that compassion, that understanding, that ability to connect with someone on a human level, you're showing up as a truly authentic, graceful, forgiving, loving leader. A leader who cares more about their team than they do about them, because they know the team's success is their success. When the team is great, the leader's great. When the team is moving forward and operating on all cylinders, there is no better feeling for great leaders is when the team is rocking. Because that means that they are now sitting in their power. They're sitting in their excellence. They're sitting in their genius. They know they've got this. They are rocking on all cylinders. That is just, not only is it beautiful to feel, it's beautiful to observe. And if you want to get there, you got to be willing to be open to feedback, number one. You got to be willing to give people some grace, show some forgiveness so you're not holding things over their head forever. And then show some compassion. Love your people. Love your people. Because here's the thing. Organizations are made up of people, but companies are not people. Companies are entities. Companies are in place, for-profit ones are in place for profit. They're in place for shareholder return. Unfortunately, that's where we've really morphed to. Shareholder return, not stakeholder return. Because stakeholder return includes, right, employees, vendors, everybody, customers. It's not just monetary. It's much broader than that. Whereas shareholder return tends to be focused specifically on monetary return and gain. And so if you're really looking to lead and really looking to serve, you will think broader than that. You will think about stakeholders, and you won't forget yourself as a stakeholder. You're a stakeholder in the success of your team. You're a stakeholder in the success of your business. You're a stakeholder in the success of your life. You're a stakeholder in the success of your relationship. You're a stakeholder because it's broader than just any monetary return. It's that feeling of joy. It's that feeling of connection, because we are communal beings, although I hate communal living. Oh, sidebar, by the way, sending up so much concern and care and love and peace to those families of the building that collapsed in Surfside. There just are no words other than that. So just sending that out to all of those folks. I don't know if we have listeners in Florida, but if we do, I'm sure we have people who have friends in Surfside. Just sending you lots of love and light and prayers for peace, because that's a really tough situation. So it's really important that we act and we show up in ways that reflect how we want to be and how we want to exist and how we want to engage. And that in doing so, we also recognize and give ourselves grace when we are just overwhelmed, when our systems can't take anymore, when that nervous system response is in fight or flight, or it's in dorsal, and we're in freeze mode. We just can't do anything else. We just want to Netflix and chill, or we need to just take a nap. We need to just sit and be and wallow. But the idea is that through grace and forgiveness and compassion or love for ourselves and others, we can acknowledge that moment. We can be in that moment, and we can move through that moment. Because again, the only way to get over something is to move through it. You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You can't not experience it. You have to experience it. But sitting somewhere, having that idea of grace and forgiveness, whatever your higher thing is in the universe, putting that out in the universe, stepping out on whatever your faith practice is to say, I know there is a bigger plan. I know there's a reason. I don't know what that is. And that's really, really playing with my lack of patience and my desire for control. But being able to acknowledge that and have some people around you who can lift you up and support you as you are working through that, that's important. And leaders, we are the ones that are that for our team. That support system, right? That source of clarity, that source of forgiveness, that source of, okay, well, let's just step back and see what happened. Let's do a postmortem. Let's see what went wrong and how we can do it different next time. Let's take a minute. Let's take a minute to just breathe. Let's take a pause. Let's all get up and just walk away. Just walk away. We're not going to think about it anymore today. Just walk away today, because it will be here tomorrow. And we'll pick back up when we've all had some rest, when we've all had a chance to reflect, we've all had a chance to grieve, and then we'll move forward. Because that's a lot of times what people are dealing with, because grief comes in all forms. There's a lot of grief after a failure. Shame, frustration, irritation, anger, all of that stuff. The 5 stages of grief, right, happen. And so being graceful and being a graceful leader understands that grief happens at all stages and in any points in our lifetime. And by being a compassionate person and by understanding, and even if we don't understand directly, by having enough compassion to at least listen and be empathetic, even if we can't be sympathetic, to be empathetic, it gives people a chance to just recover. And when you do that, here's the beauty. When you do that, you never know the kind of genius you're tapping into just because you've given someone a chance to just be, a chance to be vulnerable, a chance to be less than perfect. It's one of the things they talk about, in society. We talk a lot about healthcare and childcare and pay equity and how we keep women in the workforce and how we, through this pandemic, so many women have left. And one of the things you hear talking about is how do we create environments that are accepting, right, of women, There's the star track athlete right now who now has her own design. Nike dropped her when she went on maternity leave, which really makes me upset with Nike because I was a Nike supporter after the cap thing, but really makes me unhappy with them. And we'll see what their response is after this. But she now has her own line. Good for her. And she has an ad campaign out where she actually is showing her cesarean section scar. And it's an indication, right? It's an indication of the pain and just the difficulty of childbirth, right? It is a difficult, ugly, heavy process. And for those who've had, challenges, it can be even more difficult and painful. And yet we expect, or businesses or organizations, society expects women, because we have, to just manage it all. And to not give time and grace, right, for maternity leave, for taking care of home, for taking care of kids and all that kind of stuff. And you get penalized for having taken a break. It's like a two-edged sword. If you're not married and don't have kids, right, what's wrong with you? You're only here to procreate. If you are married and have kids, why are you working? If you get married while you're in business, oh my gosh, maybe we don't need to promote her because she's probably going to start a family, so she's going to need time. How about you just create flexibility? How about you ask the person? Not if they're getting pregnant or any of that. As your HR person, there are things you cannot ask. But how about you just talk to people about how you see their exceptional talent and how you'd like to use it and how you'd like to move them through, and give them the opportunity to say, you know what, I would love that right now. I've got a little bit of a challenge in terms of my ability to travel at the moment. Or I am taking care of, aging parents or family members or people in my life with special needs. And so my ability to travel or move or my flexibility is different at this point in time in my life. And then talk about how you can still take advantage of that talent in other ways. Because there are many, many ways to utilize people's talents. It's not just about up or out. Career is about flow. It's not about path. Up is not the only way to grow. Sometimes out is the way to grow, or across, or down, and then up again. Sometimes that dip is the kickstart you need for a, exponential growth. But that flexibility, that willingness to be flexible, that willingness to think, that willingness to be a true leader relies on our willingness to have compassion, our willingness to forgive, and our willingness to give people grace. Even if we don't understand it through our own personal experience, we can understand it through our humanity, through our basic humanness. We can understand it. We can be accepting of the fact that everyone goes through seasons and that people will be in your life or your business for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And sometimes the people that you think are in your life for a lifetime go away for a bit. But if they're really meant to be in your life for a lifetime, they always come back. There was just a season where something was meant to be different. And it's the same for employees. One of the strongest things you can do for employees when you're recruiting or you've got great talent is treat them well and be excited for them when they get another opportunity. Why? Instead of being, angry that they're leaving? Because by doing so, you are actually creating people who may be boomerangers, as they call them. They may come back later with exceptional talent and experience that you can take advantage of. But they also become some of your greatest cheerleaders. Their story, when they tell others, is about how great an experience they had with you as a leader or with your business or with your company. They become your evangelist, for lack of a better word, for your organization. Why? Because you have treated them well. You have seen them as people. You've seen them as human. Yes, you have pushed them. You have had expectations. You maybe have pushed them very, very hard, harder than they thought they were capable. And they succeeded. But you've done so in a way that is focused on a real goal and real strategy and clarity and compassion and forgiveness and grace. And you are just as excited for their success as you would be for your own, if not more so. And that's what that's showing up and sitting in that forgiveness and that grace and that compassion means. That's what it means. It means that it's not about you. Although you do have to put yourself on the list at some point, because if you're not taking care of you, you can't show up for anyone else. It's practically impossible to do so. We try, but it is practically impossible to show up the best you if you're not taking care of you. Make sense?
Can I give a comment that
Absolutely.
Miss Tatum, Kathy Tatum says, I gave my mom grace when she was dying, even though she abused me. God told me, you show her grace so she can see all she has done. God's forgiveness shows through me. That person she tried to break is caring for her at the end of grace.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Because we can't expect grace if we're not willing to give grace. And it is not easy, especially in that situation. And thank you for sharing, especially in that situation, right? When people have done us wrong. Like I said, there's some stuff that I still think of. My first job, first boss, we learn more from our bad bosses sometimes than we do from our good ones. There's stuff that if I let myself think about it, I can chew on that from 20 years ago. I mean, I have not forgotten. I have not forgotten. But the challenge is giving myself grace in that moment, because I did the best I could with what I had at the moment, but also giving myself grace now to say that became that stepping stone for where I am now. I would not be where or who I am now without that stuff. That's grace. That's grace. And if we can find it within us to give that, we will also get it. And I don't know about y'all, but there are many a day when I really need as much grace as possible. Because times are just a little insane. They're just a little insane.
Now, can I ask, is grace also forgetting, or is grace I'm giving you grace and I understand this was a bad day or a bad time for you, but does that mean you still have to reconnect even after something bad has happened?
Right. I think I see there's a difference between grace and forgiveness, right? Okay. And forgetting and forgiveness, and forgetting and grace. Grace and forgiveness don't necessarily require you to forget. What they require you to do is to move forward. Because by having the experience, again, the experience forms our behaviors going forward, right? So we need to know. It's just like, we know if we touch the hot stove, we're going to get burned. Mm-hmm. We don't forget that, right? Because it builds on our experience, and we know if we don't want to be in pain, we don't keep doing that. So we'll forgive someone and we give someone grace because they're going through whatever they're going through and they are who they are. But that doesn't mean we have to continually put ourselves in a situation to experience that same pain over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. That is not necessary. That's not necessary. You can love people from afar. You can love people from afar. With your whole heart, you can love them from afar. I remember when we were growing up, my brother and I, my mom and dad told us from the time we were really little, they told us two things. One, they said, if something ever happens to you, you call us. We got you. If you did it, don't waste your quarter because you know better, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing they told us. But the second thing they told us was, we expect if anything happens to one of us or both of us, we expect you guys to take care of each other. Mm-hmm. But if one of y'all is going down the wrong path, let them go. Love them from afar. Help them if you can, but don't allow yourself to be taken down that same path with them. So it doesn't mean that you don't love the person. It doesn't mean that you don't have compassion. It doesn't mean that you're not willing to serve and help. But not everyone is in a position to accept help. Not everyone is ready to accept forgiveness. Not everyone is ready for what you have to give to them. And part of grace and compassion is understanding and recognizing that and doing what you can in the moment and forgiving yourself for the stuff you can't do. in the moment, and forgiving them for who they are and how they acted. Because I think at the end of the day, you know, just my perspective is we all do the best we can with what we got and the information we have at the time. And sometimes we hit the ball out of the park, and sometimes we really mess up. And we just try to understand that, own it, and make it right. That's the best we can do some days. It's just the best we can do.
T.D. Jakes said this morning, I was listening to a sermon, and he said, just because I can't handle your problem right now doesn't mean I don't like you. I just need grace because I'm going through my own thing. And I've noticed that sometimes when you say that to people, they really are not hearing what you're saying, that I want to help you. I love you. But right now I've got so much on my plate. Right. I'm not going to be able to help you. And they still keep coming. Is it a grace thing to back away? Not that I don't love you, but maybe I need to stop answering your calls because it's not unkind to be clear. And if you try to be clear and they're still not listening, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do have to just put up the wall, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just have to back away, and that can cause pain as well, right? Especially if the person that is coming to you for help is in pain, mm-hmm. and they're in so much pain that they can't hear, then your backing away can add to their pain, and you just have to know that. You just have to know that. If you have been clear and you just simply are not in the headspace or the heart space to be able to serve, you can actually do more damage when you're in that place. And so sometimes being graceful, being a leader, being compassionate is pulling away. Sometimes you have to you have to be honest with people. You know, my heart is broken. Yeah. I am absolutely broken by this situation, and know that there may be times when I just can't respond. Or you say, I'm absolutely broken, but right now I can handle this. Let's just keep moving. Or know that there may be things when I say, I can't talk about that right now, and I just need you to understand. Mm-hmm. It's not being mean. It's not that I don't love you, but I can't. I need some time to handle some things, right? I need some time to get my mind right and my heart right. And that's not about being mean. But again, as I said earlier, I think I put this in my article that I did on servant leadership, because being servant leadership is not about you, and being in service is not about you. Not everyone is ready or in a position or in a headspace or heart space to be helped. Not everyone is ready to be served. And the example I give sometimes is, because customer service has gotten so bad. It's gotten so bad. And in that same space, not everyone is a person who should be serving, right? Not everyone needs to be in customer service. But the example I give is, when you, especially in technology, something isn't working, and it's been not working for a long time, and you keep calling and they tell you something else to do, and they tell you something, you know what? It just gets to be too much. So much so that I've gotten to the point when I have, especially a call around a technical service, I start with, here's the deal. I've already turned everything on and off. I've already unplugged and replugged. I have already restarted. So I need you to start at step number 14, because I'm not doing all that stuff again. Right? And sometimes you get those people who got their checklist and they just can't, because organizations have gotten so litigious and so process oriented that they don't allow people to think and really problem solve. But if you keep coming at me that way, right, and you keep not listening and you keep blaming and you keep doing all that stuff, my understanding goes to zero. And my language can get kind of foul. Ooh. And I am no longer listening. And the reality is, in that moment, there's probably nothing you can do to make me happy, short of just fixing the thing I'm asking you to fix, right? And if you can't fix it, then nothing else you can do is going to work for me. I am not in a headspace or heart space to be served. I'm not. I cannot receive it. And so sometimes those people that are coming to us are not in a space where they can receive it. Right. And we've got to understand that. And sometimes that comes out really ugly. And we've got to be willing to just move through that. We may have to revisit it later and say, you know what, here's some of the things you said to me, and that was just not okay. It wasn't okay. It was really mean-spirited, and I didn't deserve it. And while it may have been not what you intended, it was absolutely how it landed. Right. And we have to be willing to apologize, not necessarily for how we felt, because our feelings are real, but we should be ready and willing and able to apologize for how our feelings and our actions made someone else feel. and a real apology, not I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. No, I'm telling you, you made me feel that way. So the apology is, I apologize that my behavior caused you pain.
On the flip side of that, now you say wait a while to say that, and then what if the person that you're telling that to, because I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say I said something, you were mad, you were hurt, you let it go and didn't say anything else, and we're in a good place and we're going on about our business. 2 months later, you come back and say, you know, the way you said that to me really made me mad. I probably won't have the grace to receive it. Then I'm like, girl, I'm gone. Right. That's what you're talking about.
Right. You have to be careful. When I say you might need to take a minute, I don't mean take 2 years. Because see, that's harboring, right? That's harboring and letting stuff fester. That's not about letting it go.
Okay.
Right? That's that, like I said, that's that thing that happened to me in my first job 20-some years ago that I still can chew on.
Mm-hmm.
No. If you're going to say something, you need to say something in a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same reason why when you're training a new puppy, if you've left the puppy at home all day and the puppy is pooped on the floor, you don't get home 6 hours later and put the puppy's nose in the poop. Because they're not going to understand what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
Because the activity has happened 6 hours ago.
Yeah.
They're not connecting actions and consequences. It's the same thing when we're dealing with each other. Sometimes in the moment you have to step away because you're like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to respond to this in a way that is nice or kind or understanding because my understanding is 0. Let me get back to you. And then you need to get back in a timely manner. That's not 2 months. That's not 2 weeks. And it may be that you come back to somebody and say, you know what? I'm going to need longer than a minute. We do need to revisit this, but I really need to take some time and I need you to give me some grace to do that. But we are going to revisit this. The challenge with that is the person on the other end may then have a whole lot of anxiety until y'all get to talk again. Mm-hmm. Right? So these relationship things are not easy. And I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, and I'm not claiming to be. This is my perspective based on my experience, right? With me, with others, and in my professional experience. So that being forgiving and that understanding and letting it, that doesn't mean you don't let it go, right? And doesn't mean you harbor onto it and you just harp on it at the same time. Right. But sometimes you do need to just walk away from folks. Sometimes for a minute, sometimes forever. Because people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And trying to make lifetime out of season can be really debilitating. And again, some people that are meant to be in our lives for a lifetime go away for a minute, but they come back. They come back. And if they come back, that means they're meant to come back. And we don't always know why or how or what the outcome is going to be. And that makes it really painful because if you're like me, you want to know. You want to know the end game. And we can't always know the end game. But what we can know is there's always a reason. There's always a reason. And sometimes we will never know that reason. And sometimes it will be revealed to us in time. That's why those people who have really patient, like I say, the patience of Job, I admire those people because that is not me. Patience is not my superpower. It is not. I work on it all the time, but it is not my superpower. It is on my list of things to continually work on as I continue to do my best to serve out the purpose and live in the purpose that I know has been set forward for me. And try to get clear on that because, you know, every once in a while stuff gets muddy. Even stuff that you know is real, it gets muddy because we get in our own heads and we try to take everything back and control everything. And then stuff gets messy and muddy. And we have to regroup. And in that, we give ourselves some grace. We give ourselves some compassion. We listen to our hearts to understand and not judge, right? Because sometimes we're judging ourselves too. So not only do you need to listen to others to understand, not respond, we need to listen to ourselves to understand and not respond. To understand if the story we're telling ourselves is true or not. Do the facts line up? Because the facts may be true, but the story we're weaving around those facts may or may not be. So that same grace and love and forgiveness that we're giving other people, we do need to turn that around and do the same for us. All right.
You know, I was telling the audience the other day that I had somebody was calling me on Facebook Messenger, and I never answered the phone on Facebook Messenger, and they kept calling me back to back. So finally, I was on a Zoom meeting. I was getting frustrated, so I got on my tablet and said, "What is the problem on those Zoom? I can't answer the phone." They said, "Oh, nothing. I don't want nothing. Just call me when you get a chance." And this wasn't a person that I talked to. This is just a Facebook friend or whatnot. And I said, Okay, and then I knew in my heart that I was so angry that I wouldn't have the grace to respond back, so I didn't. And so, is that a wrong thing to do? Or when you know you, I didn't have the grace to, because I'm like, I'm not calling you. I don't know you like that. And two, I don't even have the grace to respond back right now because I didn't know why you were blowing my phone up.
Right. You got to know you, right? That's one thing that is so clear. You've got to be self-aware. You've got to know you, and then be able to respond accordingly. And sometimes we don't catch ourselves either. Sometimes stuff comes out of our mouth before we can catch it because we are just in that moment, right? But I think that's the thing we also learn is we teach people, right, how to treat us. And that is difficult sometimes when people are just blowing your phone up and it's like, wait, what? And so then if you don't have grace to respond or grace to call someone back, that's also some of where you sit back and say, okay, one, am I going to respond at all? Mm-hmm. And if I am, then how can I respond in a way that works for me and enables me to be as graceful as possible? So I may still not call the person, but maybe I will do another DM and say, okay, hey, I'm back. Still can't get on the phone, but what do you need? How can I help you? You know, so we can change the way we communicate. We can change the way we engage based on our energy level. But we need to give ourselves some grace and be willing to modify as we need.
Can we shout out to your international audience? We have Canada in the house today.
Yay!
We have Japan in the house today. Ecuador is in the house today. United Kingdom is in the house. Mexico is in the house. Philippines is in the house. Germany is in the house. We have San Luis in the house today. We have Minx, that's correct, okay, is in the house today. We have Washington, D.C., Hartgrove is in the house. Tampa, St. Pete, Sarasota, yay, San Antonio, Texas, St. Louis, Missouri, New York, Dallas, Fort Worth, Kansas City, Austin, Texas, Omaha, and Houston.
Oh, y'all, my heart is just full. My heart is full. I am so blessed and honored and humbled that you would spend time with me this morning. All of my folks in Latin America, I am going to get my Spanish back, y'all, so I can do these in Spanish. I will. Thank you.
Let's not leave our Houstonians out.
And our Houstonians.
On Facebook, we have Michelle Johnson. We have Julie Hitchens that was in the house. Kathy Tatum, Mrs. Singletary, Pastor Deborah Holly, and Annette Phillips in New York. Awesome. Cynthia J. Hickman, our gardening friend.
Yes.
And, so that was Michelle Johnson.
Good morning. Thank you guys. And I'm on StreamYard, so I don't know who's on my Facebook page. Although I do see my Sarah this morning from Houston. So if you join me on my Facebook page or on my LinkedIn page, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll be back next week. I will continue to bring you some PSAs. Please register to vote. If you are not, take somebody with you, get them registered. It is not that difficult. Oh, and remember, make sure you got a real ID. We talked about this last time. Everyone is saying that maybe the next frontier to keep people from voting. Make sure you have a real ID, which has the little star thing on it, right? So make sure there is nothing about your identification or any of that that's going to keep you from exercising your voice. Every vote counts. Your voice matters. Thank you, guys. See you next week.